What if I told you some places on Earth look so unreal they seem like glitches in reality? There's a giant white desert that turns into the world's biggest mirror after rain. A boiling valley where the ground bubbles with neon green acid. And an island where trees literally bleed red like something out of a horror movie. Here are 50 places on Earth that look so fake, your brain will refuse to believe they exist. World's largest mirror. From above, this place looks like the sky itself has fallen onto the Earth. This is Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia, the largest salt flat on the planet. During the rainy season, a thin layer of water transforms these 4,000 square miles into the world's largest mirror. It's so flat and reflective that NASA actually uses it to calibrate satellites. Standing here, the horizon disappears, leaving you floating in an endless blue void. Toxic alien pools. This landscape looks like it belongs on a toxic alien world. The Danakil Depression in Ethiopia is filled with bright yellow and green pools formed by sulfur reacting with volcanic heat. It's one of the hottest places on Earth, with temperatures often above 45 degrees Celsius and parts of the land more than 120 meters below sea level. Upside down forest. Did you know there's an island in Yemen where trees look like they're growing upside down? On Socotra Island, millions of years of isolation created one of the strangest ecosystems on Earth. Nearly a third of its plant life exists nowhere else on the planet. Its most famous tree even produces a deep red sap that people once believed was real dragon's blood, giving the entire landscape an eerie, prehistoric feel unlike anywhere else in the world. Frozen sandstone wave. Looking at these rock formations might make you feel like you're having an optical illusion. This is the wave in Arizona. These wave-like sandstone formations were carved by wind and rain over 190 million years. The rock is so fragile that only 64 visitors a day are allowed to enter through a lottery system. One wrong step can crush the delicate layers of history beneath your feet. Rainbow Mountains. Have you ever seen a mountain range that looks like it was hand-painted by nature itself? In Jianghe Dangxia Park, China, 24 million years of layered sandstone and shifting minerals were slowly sculpted by tectonic forces into hills draped in vivid bands of color. The effect is already breathtaking, but after rainfall, the stripes saturate into something even more extraordinary: Eye of the Sahara. Imagine a giant, glowing eye staring back at you from the middle of the desert. This is the Richet structure in Mauritania, also known as the Eye of the Sahara. It's nearly 25 miles wide and is best seen from space. While it looks like an asteroid impact site, geologists believe it's actually a deeply eroded volcanic dome. Some people even believe it's the true location of the lost city of Atlantis, Strawberry Milk Lake. This lake is so bright pink it looks like a massive pool of strawberry milk. But it's actually Lake Hillier in Australia. Unlike other colored lakes, the water stays pink even when you take it out in a bottle. Scientists believe the color comes from a unique combination of algae and pink bacteria. Surrounded by white salt and deep green forests, the contrast against the blue ocean is absolutely breathtaking. Subterranean galaxy. If you ever wanted to walk through a subterranean galaxy, this is your chance. These are the Waitomo glowworm caves in New Zealand. Thousands of tiny larvae hang from the ceiling, emitting a brilliant sapphire glow to attract prey. Taking a boat through these silent, dark caverns feels like drifting through deep space. It's a living light show found nowhere else in the world. Explosive ice bubbles. These frozen bubbles look like beautiful works of art trapped in ice. But they are actually pockets of highly flammable methane gas in Abraham Lake, Canada. As plants on the lake bed decay, they release gas that gets trapped as the water freezes. While they look stunning if you were to crack the ice and light a match, the escaping gas would create a massive fireball. Liquid Rainbow River. Flowing through the Colombian jungle, Caño Cristales is often called the River of Five Colors. For a few months each year, the riverbed transforms into vibrant shades of red, yellow, and green. The colors don't come from chemicals or minerals, but from a rare aquatic plant called Macarenia clavigera. When water levels and sunlight are just right, the river becomes a breathtaking natural display that lasts only a short time each year. The Cotton Castle. Did you know there's a place in Turkey that looks like a giant frozen waterfall, but the water is actually warm? Rising from the landscape, Pamukkale forms dazzling white terraces that resemble a castle made of cotton. For thousands of years, mineral-rich thermal springs have slowly built these layers of bright travertine. The turquoise pools have attracted visitors since Roman times, which is why this surreal landscape is famously known as the Cotton Castle. Ice Fortress. You might think you've stumbled into a crystalline fortress from a fantasy movie. But these are the Vatnajökull ice caves in Iceland. The ice is so dense that it absorbs all light except for deep electric blue. Because the glaciers are always moving, these caves collapse and reform every year. No two people ever see the exact same cave, making every visit a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The Divine Spotlight. This place looks like a divine spotlight is shining down from the heavens. This is Cenote in Mexico. It's an underground sinkhole with a single opening in the ceiling. At noon, a beam of light hits the center of the turquoise pool perfectly. The Maya believed these cenotes were portals to the underworld. Today, it remains one of the most cinematic and spiritual natural sights on the planet. Natural Polka Dot Lake. In the middle of summer, this lake turns into a giant natural polka dot carpet. This is Spotted Lake in British Columbia, Canada. When the water evaporates, it leaves behind dense circles of minerals like magnesium and calcium, depending on the mineral balance. The spots turn green, yellow, or blue. You can actually walk on the hardened walkways between the circles, making it feel like a surreal board game. The Sea of Stars. This beach looks like the night sky has fallen into the ocean. Found on Vadu Island in the Maldives, this sea of stars is caused by bioluminescent plankton. When the waves crash or you walk on the sand, these tiny organisms emit a bright blue glow. It's a chemical reaction that turns the shoreline into a glowing electric blue dreamscape that has to be seen to be believed. The fairy tale curves. In Poland's Crooked Forest, around 400 pine trees grow with a dramatic 90-degree bend at their base, all curving toward the north. The strange shapes make the forest feel almost supernatural. No one knows exactly why the trees grew this way. Some believe a rare snowstorm bent the young trunks, while others think farmers intentionally shaped them for boat building. Whatever the cause, the uniform curves give the forest a haunting fairy tale atmosphere. The Dead World. Deadvlei in Namibia feels like a scene from a dead world. Blackened trees have stood here for nearly 700 years after the water that once sustained them disappeared. The desert air is so dry that the trunks never decayed, against the bone-white clay floor, and the towering orange dunes, some nearly 1,000 feet tall. The skeletal trees create a landscape so striking it resembles surrealist art. Prehistoric stone eggs. Giant stone spheres lie scattered across a beach in New Zealand, resembling enormous dinosaur eggs. Known as the Meraki boulders, many of them are nearly perfect circles, some more than 6 feet wide. They weren't carved by humans. Instead, they are natural formations called concretions that developed on the ocean floor around 60 million years ago, forming slowly in layers much like a pearl. Over time, coastal erosion exposed them and dropped the massive stone marbles onto the shore. Volcanic honeycomb. It looks like a giant honeycomb built for a prehistoric race of bees. This is the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. It consists of 40,000 interlocking basalt columns, most of them hexagonal. The ocean sinkhole. On the Oregon coast, a violent natural spectacle happens when the tide rises. Thor's Well is a powerful ocean sinkhole where crashing waves shoot water high into the air before it disappears back into the hole. During high tide, the churning water creates the illusion that the ocean itself is being drained into a bottomless pit. Luke Skywalker's hideout. rising nearly 700 feet out of the Atlantic Ocean. Skellig Michael looks like a jagged stone fortress off the coast of Ireland. In the 6th century, monks built a remote monastery at the very top, carving more than 600 stone steps into the steep cliffs. Its isolation and dramatic landscape were so otherworldly that it later became Luke Skywalker's hideout in the film. Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Forest of limestone knives. Imagine a forest made entirely of razor-sharp limestone knives. This is Singhi de Bemaraha in Madagascar. Millions of years of erosion have carved the rock into vertical, needle-thin peaks. It's so sharp that humans can barely navigate it. But white lemurs leap across the spikes with ease. It's one of the most fortress-like and inaccessible landscapes on the planet. Giant chocolate kisses. These mountains look like giant Hershey's Kisses dropped across the landscape. The chocolate hills in the Philippines consist of over 1,200 symmetrical, cone-shaped hills. In the dry season, the grass turns a deep brown, giving them their name. Scientists still aren't entirely sure how they formed so uniformly, but they look more like a man-made art installation than a natural geological formation. The Bleeding Glacier. Deep in Antarctica, a glacier appears to be bleeding into the snow. This eerie phenomenon is known as blood falls. This eerie sight is caused by iron-rich salt water trapped under a glacier for 2 million years. When the water finally leaks out and touches the oxygen in the air, it rusts instantly, turning a deep, gory red. The Lost World Plateau. At the border of Venezuela, Brazil, and Guyana rises one of the most unusual mountains on Earth, Mount Roraima, a giant flat plateau surrounded by nearly vertical cliffs. It's nearly 1,300 feet tall, and its top is completely flat. It's so high and isolated that it creates its own weather and is home to unique species found nowhere else. It was the primary inspiration for the Lost World in literature and film. The desert lagoons. Imagine a landscape of endless white sand dunes, like a giant desert of soft rolling hills. But instead of being dry, the valleys between the dunes fill with bright turquoise water during the rainy season. This is Lençóis Maranhenses in Brazil, where seasonal rains create thousands of crystal clear lagoons scattered across the sand. The result looks almost impossible. A desert where you can swim in cool freshwater pools stretching as far as the eye can see. The hexagonal cathedral. Nature apparently studied architecture before carving out Fingal's Cave on the Scottish coast. Every wall is lined with perfectly hexagonal basalt columns, mirroring the famous Giant's Causeway, creating a space that feels more like a grand cathedral than a sea cave. Martian Valley. You might think this is a screenshot from a movie about Mars. But this is Val de la Luna in Chile's Atacama Desert. With its jagged stone peaks, dry salt beds, and massive dunes, it's one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. It hasn't rained here in centuries. Because the landscape is so similar to the Red Planet, NASA often tests their Mars rovers in this exact location. Sky of Fairy Chimneys. In central Turkey lies a landscape shaped by ancient volcanic eruptions and centuries of human history. Cappadocia is famous for its towering fairy chimneys, cone-shaped rock formations carved from soft volcanic stone. Over time, people carved homes, churches, and even entire underground cities into the rock. At sunrise, hundreds of hot air balloons drift above the valleys, turning the sky into one of the most surreal scenes on Earth. The accidental alien geyser. This geyser looks like a neon-colored alien organism growing out of the Earth. Fly Geyser in Nevada was actually created by accident when a geothermal well wasn't capped correctly. Over decades, minerals built up into these strange, multi-peaked mounds. The brilliant reds and greens come from algae that thrive in the hot water. Glowing Bluebell Sea. Every spring, a forest in Belgium transforms into a glowing sea of blue flowers. Hallebau's forest becomes famous for its millions of blooming bluebells that blanket the ground beneath tall beech trees. When morning mist and sunlight filter through the canopy, The forest glows with an almost magical blue-purple light, the stone giants. This is a forest of knives located in Russia's Ural Mountains. The Mampupuna rock formations consist of 7 massive, strangely shaped stone pillars. They stand up to 140 feet tall in the middle of a flat plateau. Local legend says they are giants turned to stone by a shaman. Geologically, they are the hard cores of a mountain that was completely weathered away over 200 million years. The Great Blue Hole. Off the coast of Belize lies a massive circular sinkhole hidden beneath the ocean's surface. Known as the Great Blue Hole, this underwater cavern stretches over 1,000 feet across and plunges more than 400 feet deep. It was once a limestone cave formed during the last ice age, before rising sea levels flooded it, and created one of the world's most mysterious diving sites, beach of billions of shells. This beach is made of billions of tiny white shells instead of sand. Shell Beach in Australia is one of the few places where the shoreline is a layer of cockle shells up to 30 feet deep. The water here is so salty that the shells have no natural predators, allowing their population to explode. Floating Castle. This looks like a floating castle from a Disney movie. Mont Saint-Michel in France is a tidal island topped by a medieval abbey. At low tide, you can walk across the sand to reach it. At high tide, the ocean rushes in and completely surrounds the fortress. It's so cinematic that it served as the direct inspiration for the kingdom in the movie Tangled. Forest of Giants. Towering above the forests of California are the tallest living things on Earth. Redwood National Park is home to trees that can grow over 380 feet tall, taller than a 35-story building. The hand-painted peak, hidden high in the Andes Mountains of Peru, is a landscape that looks almost painted by hand. Known as Rainbow Mountain or Vinicunca, its vivid stripes of gold, red, lavender, and turquoise come from layers of different minerals in the rock. Striped domes. Deep within Australia's remote wilderness lies one of the most unusual landscapes on Earth. The Bungle Bungle Range is made up of massive dome-shaped rock formations striped with orange and black bands. These ancient sandstone towers are over 350 million years old, and for centuries they were known only to local Aboriginal communities before the outside world discovered them in the 1980s. Eternal Mist Forest. High in the mountains of Costa Rica lies a forest that almost never fully emerges from the clouds. The Monteverde cloud forest is constantly wrapped in mist, creating a lush ecosystem where moss, orchids, and rare plants cover nearly every surface. Because the clouds pass directly through the trees, the forest forms a dense, layered world filled with unique wildlife and echoing bird calls. Floating avatar peaks. What kind of landscape has thousands of towering stone pillars that seem to rise straight into the clouds? In China's Zhangjiajie National Forest Park, more than 3,000 vertical sandstone pillars dominate the landscape, some reaching heights of nearly 3,500 feet. Often surrounded by drifting clouds, they can appear as if they're floating in mid-air. The scenery is so surreal that it even inspired the famous Hallelujah Mountains, seen in the movie Avatar. The Valley of Goblins. Scattered across a desert valley in Utah are thousands of strange rock formations that look almost alive. This place is known as Goblin Valley, where wind and erosion carved soft sandstone into mushroom-shaped figures called hoodoos. Walking through the valley feels like wandering through a silent crowd of stone creatures frozen in time. Pink Lake. This lake stays bright pink even if you put it in a glass. Unlike other pink lakes that change with the light, Lake Retba in Senegal has a permanent strawberry hue. This is due to a high concentration of salt and a unique type of algae. Local workers spend all day in the water harvesting salt, coating their skin in shea butter to protect themselves from the extreme salinity. The Smuggler's Shipwreck Cove. Hidden between towering limestone cliffs on the Greek island of Zakynthos is one of the most dramatic beaches on Earth. Navajo Beach is famous for the rusted wreck of a smuggler's ship that ran aground here in 1980. Today, the orange wreck sits on bright white sand surrounded by neon blue water, creating a scene that looks almost too perfect to be real. The Crystal Graveyard. This is a forest where the trees have been turned to solid stone. The petrified forest in Arizona looks like a graveyard of giant logs, but they are actually made of solid quartz and jasper. 225 million years ago, these trees fell into a river and were buried in volcanic ash. Over time, the wood was replaced by minerals, preserving every detail of the bark in sparkling, multicolored crystal. Underwater waterfall. From high above the island of Mauritius, the ocean appears to be collapsing into a giant underwater waterfall. Dark streams seem to plunge deep into the sea, as if the ocean itself is draining into a hidden abyss. In reality, this surreal scene is created by shifting sand and powerful currents pulling sediment down a steep underwater slope. The illusion is so convincing that it looks like a massive cascade frozen beneath the waves. Door to Hell. In the middle of Turkmenistan's Karakum Desert burns a crater that has been on fire for over 50 years. Known as the Door to Hell, this massive pit was created during a Soviet drilling accident in 1971. The roar of the fire and the heat you can feel from hundreds of yards away make it feel like you are standing at the edge of the world. Engineers ignited the leaking gas expecting it to burn out in a few weeks, but the flames are still raging today. It's a haunting reminder of how a human mistake can create a permanent glowing scar on the planet. Fossilized serpent eggs. These rocks look like giant spheres of gold during a sunset. The Kalu Kalu, or Devil's Marbles, in Australia are massive granite boulders that seem to balance precariously on top of each other. Over millions of years, water seeped into cracks in the granite and expanded, breaking them into rounded shapes. To the local Warramungu people, these are the fossilized eggs of the rainbow serpent. Giant Crystal Cave. Deep inside a mine in Mexico lies a cave that looks like the throne room of a crystal giant. Towering beams of translucent crystal rise from the ground like enormous glass pillars, some stretching over 36 feet long and weighing several tons. These selenite crystals formed slowly in mineral-rich water over hundreds of thousands of years, creating a glittering underground world that feels more like a fantasy palace than a natural cave. The land of ancient ice. Nestled within the Canadian Rockies, Yoho National Park stands as one of North America's most awe-inspiring corners of wilderness. Spread across British Columbia, it shelters dramatic peaks sculpted by glaciers, rushing turquoise waters, and some of the most powerful waterfalls on Canadian soil. Takakor Falls is among its crown jewels, plummeting more than 380 meters. It ranks as one of the tallest in the country. The glowing blue hue of its lakes and rivers comes from glacial flour, ultra-fine rock ground down by ancient ice and suspended in meltwater. From glowing oceans to alien deserts, these places remind us how incredible our planet really is. Which one shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible places around the world.